pretty interesting statistics here with the partnership we did with Kantar. We firmly believe that without properly addressing privacy and security issues in digital health, that the industry will not propel at the pace it should. And as you can see from the stats presented on the screen, consumers are still extremely wary. So you're in for a treat. I'm thrilled to welcome to the stage a 30-year-old pioneer in privacy, Phil Dunkelberger, the CEO of Knock Knock Labs, to deliver this very timely talk.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be here. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes. I'd like to spend 15 million. Wish I had 15 million. I think I left most of it at the airport last night. Those of you who are having cognitive dissonance, this is really me. One of the things is identity. That's just a 15-year-old picture of me. So I appreciate them taking me back in time. I certainly got a lot of compliments on the web of saying, Phil, you look great. I haven't seen you in 15 years, and you look the same. I do. So let's jump in. I've got 15 minutes to talk about what I think are really relevant topics that they've asked me to come speak about. Privacy undergirds. I could give this presentation in any of the areas. There's a big panel going on with some of the big names talking about privacy. And for some of you who might have known my background, I ran a company called PGP, which stood for Pretty Good Privacy. Any of the folks out there remember PGP, the little encryption company? Yeah. That was the forerunner of letting you whisper on the internet. The whole idea that privacy is really important to things. And it really undergirds everything we're trying to do in the areas. And today I'm going to talk specifically about some of the things that it's doing in the healthcare space. Who's there? First thing is everybody on the internet has to figure out who's there. Fundamentally, that is the issue. Why in the world do we keep talking about, is it the dog at the end of the cable on the internet, right? Who's there? And the interesting piece in the healthcare space is the ecosystem of healthcare. The payers, the patients, the caregivers, all of them have this whole construct of trying to figure out who am I dealing with if they're not dealing with me face to face. And that really comes into play when you look at how broad this idea of privacy is, because more and more today, people want more and more of your information to identify who you are, especially if you're remote. Especially if they don't have declarative statements to be able to prove who you are. How many people have now had, out in the audience, have to bring your passport to the airport because your driver's license isn't good enough, right? You gotta get a special driver's license. These are all ways, even in face-to-face issues, that people are trying to figure out who is there, who am I dealing with? Because fundamentally identity and ultimately how you get goods and services going forward in any industry is going to be based on how they can identify who you are. And that's going to play a big role in the conversation that we have going forward. As most of you know, the internet was not built for commerce. It was not built for doing things with things like health records. It was built as a research tool. And most people have been around long enough to know that this tool set was there. Given that the safeguards were not built in, we just saw a factoid that said, people don't trust what's going on out there. Maybe because every time you come home, somebody mails you something that says your credit card is no good anymore because somebody stole a whole bunch of credit card information and caused you to have to get a new credit card. Not good. That's just one simple example. Anybody have the problem at Christmas time this year, holiday season, trying to buy things and you hadn't logged in for a while and people suddenly said, hey, can you re-authenticate? Right? In the middle of you trying to get something done, I got 5 minutes to buy a Christmas gift or a holiday gift. And fundamentally, I've got to re-authenticate because the internet only works on authentication. Everybody authenticates. And there is no good guy or bad guy lane to authenticate. So now think about that in concert with health records or health information. That is the most sensitive data you can have about yourself. People want more and more information. They want to collect more information about you to establish your right to get goods and services. And at the same time, we keep failing in protecting that out there in the industry. So as you look at the internet, what is industry doing? We know what government's doing. Anybody hear about that little law that went into effect? California yesterday? First, there's many, but it's the CCR that is Consumer Privacy Act. Essentially, it's what they're trying to do all over the world is how do we protect your privacy? How do we protect the consumer in what these people are collecting and sending you and storing and trading on. That's there. And somebody put the dollar signs up about ethics and privacy. Protecting your privacy is going to cost, roughly estimated, businesses $55 billion to change the way we're protecting consumer privacy in the state of California. Well, given it's the 5th, 6th, 7th largest economy, depending on who you want to believe, that fundamentally is a big deal because most businesses in the world do business in California, so they're going to have to comply with a new law. It's not any dissimilar to what's going on in Europe with GDPR, which is the Europe, essentially, privacy regime. It's not any different what they're doing in the space of what you've heard about for years, HIPAA, which has been out there forever. The gentleman who wrote it used to be in my advisory board at PGP. He was one of the authors of it. And the fundamental problem with that was that it wasn't working because the way we were doing it wasn't taking modern computing into an environment. We were looking at it the way we used to look at computing, which is these fixed fortresses of data centers that have mass amounts of data stored and collected. Well, today, the ecosystem is different. It's basically made up of devices, people, and data looking for services. I like to think there's no more enterprise, there's no more consumer. They're just people with devices looking for data and services. And back to that data point, we got to collect it and manage it. And you see that in the Internet of Things, that new big buzzword, the Internet of Things, well, that Internet of Things is made up of devices, people, and services, but people are a key component. There will be 41.6 billion connected devices generating 79.4 zettabytes of data. And I don't know if you guys in the back can see that, but that's a big number even back there. Fundamentally, we've never tried to do this level of computing ever in the history of the world at this level. And that's what it's going to look like. So back to data being a problem, because most of the data is your data. Most of the data affects the goods and services you can get. And data is currency. 2005, after California passed the Senate Bill 1386, was encrypting data on devices because people kept losing their laptops, leaving them on planes, et cetera. They passed a Senate bill saying if you lose a laptop, you got to encrypt the data, right? You got to protect it. Well, that spawned a whole industry of trying to protect data. That became known as the data breach law. And how have we been doing? Well, not very good. We encrypted laptops and not much else. We didn't really limit access to people's databases. And what has happened is data is currency. It's traded just like you trade stocks on the dark web. And there's a lot of good stuff out there if you want to read about that. I'm not going to go deep into that today. A lot of good things out there about how much money people are making on trading on your private information. Because it's currency. Your healthcare data is the most valuable in the world because it's the most intimate parts of your life. Remember I said they want to know more and more about you to establish the goods and services that people can buy and give you? The most definitive data you have that people collect is your healthcare data, and it should be protected the most. Because when people can actually say, oh, this is Phil, and Phil goes to this pharmacy, and Phil takes these drugs, I'm a type 2 diabetic, and he takes these drugs, somebody at the far end goes, wow, they really know, this really must be Phil. Or if, like some of my friends do, they publish all this information on Facebook, right, about themselves, 15 minutes of fame, let's put it all out there. And it's really easy at that point to steal the information and go trade in this massive ecosystem that you just saw portrayed. Healthcare, defense spending and government spending, fintech banking undergird the economy of the world. And as we age in this country, more and more of this is going to come out and be at risk because we get in, collect more data, and it's currency. And a primary flaw in the healthcare space across areas is a reliance on older systems that have fundamentally been broken for a while, but there's not been money to replace them. And as I said, when you go to a hospital, you're really not walking into, I want you to think of this in the future. When you go to a hospital or a doctor's office, it's a data center. It's not a place of healing and health. It's also a data center. It's got an IT component to it that's massive. And a primary flaw today that is still out there, we're using a 50-year-old convenience to authenticate you. That's one way we authenticate, but it's still out there. And by the way, for those of you who are in the process of trying to buy things or make it better, quit buying things that rely on this. You're wasting your money. Why are you wasting your money? Because the authentication in the future is coming. It's better signaling, it's better device knowledge, it's better knowledge of a person that's linked to those things, and it's based on a server architecture that's not dependent on passwords. How many of you guys will be happy when passwords finally die? I should get a lot of hands up. They're a nuisance, but there's a lot of people out there talking about that. This is one slice of what the industry is trying to do to make it better for you. The authentication imperative leads to then ethical considerations. This imperative of, I've got to know more about you. I've got to have your authentication. I've got to know exactly what drugs you take, exactly what hospital you go to, exactly where you've traveled to before I can prescribe a solution. They then bring in the ethical considerations. How much data is enough to make a decision about healthcare, about letting you pay? I don't know of anybody in here, but I certainly have an example. My wife has been the primary caregiver of her mother and father, her late now father and her mom, for years. And I've seen what she deals with her dad's. Dad was a veteran, really tough medical situations, and I saw what she had to deal with. It's obscene. This morning it was published, $2,500 in the United States for administrative costs. Canada, $550. The amount of overlay and cost in this system has got to be wrung out. It's the number one thing we debate when we talk about healthcare. But the ethical considerations. Do you want, because you have not made a payment, somebody to deny care for you? Do you want an AI system that says, I'm reading information coming from your pacemaker and it looks like it's been hacked, so I'm going to cut that off the network? We don't want devices making those decisions on their own. There are ethical considerations about data. Data in and of itself doesn't solve the problem. Yet, we act like it does. That's a fundamental thought we've got to keep in mind as we look forward on new systems that we put in. Healthcare is moving to a massively decentralized model. It's one of the only ways we're going to be able to do patient care in the future. There's a bunch of unbelievably cool stuff going on out there that you guys will see on the show floor about people moving the primary data sets into your home and doing home care. Talked to a hospice nurse last night at dinner, and the amazing amount of gear that has to go in for an end-of-life patient. The most sensitive time for a family and friends. And one of the key components of making it work is data and essentially equipment that has to be run remotely. And that comes back to it better be done right and the information better be protected. The decentralized model is going to do exactly what it did to banking, exactly what it did to everybody roaming around the world with phones, basically spending money, going to things like PayPal. That's a decentralized model of payments. It's going to be the same thing here, and it's going to have the same ethical, moral, and fiscal considerations. So if you look at the piece that comes up here, $1.7 billion reported in digital health space in 2019. The next speaker is going to talk about this and some of the impacts that people have, and I'm going to leave you with a couple thoughts. The fundamental thing that goes back to this idea that we're spending this much money to automate, the same things we did when we brought the internet, which was a research piece to do commerce and other things. Let's not make the same mistakes that allowed for the number of data breaches, the amount of compromise to enter the healthcare space as it modernizes. We absolutely, positively can't do that. So if you look back and you look at the things I've talked about today, industry is trying to fix the problems that are out there. Industry is trying to fix the login thing. We're trying to fix it. You don't use login anymore of username and passwords. You use how you hold your phone. Wouldn't that be cool? No more usernames and passwords, how you hold the device or type on the device. Not even scanning an iris or fingerprints. We don't want to get into the whole storing of biometrics. That's a cool thing that industry is working on to make it a standard way we can do better, easier to use, more secure. Government is trying to legislate that bad players in the marketplace, bad outliers in the marketplace, get penalized. I'm not a big guy on government overreach, but I'll tell you what, when industry doesn't fix the problem, government does. That's what the data breach law 2003 was. That's what this new law in California is doing. Last but not least, I leave you with the fact that the people who are going to drive this market in the future is right here. It's the consumers of healthcare and the underpinnings of what makes it work. And it's up to you to be demanding of these systems to be secure and easy for you to use so the primary care and the ecosystem works better. And with that, I thank you for your time today.
hosting me tonight.
Thank you.